Normally on Google's Android, Google Play Services has highly elevated privileges, and that's just cybersecurity speak for it has God mode basically, and it can and does monitor everything that goes on the phone. You as the user do not have the ability to disable it. So Google Play's services, it can see every app that's installed. It monitors the usage of every app. It monitors and tracks your location and other telemetry that it reports back to Google.
Welcome to the Sovereign Computing Show, presented by ATL BitLab. I'm Jordan Bravo, and this is a podcast where we teach you how to take back control of your devices. Sovereign computing means you own your technology, not the other way around.
This episode is sponsored by ATL BitLab. ATL BitLab is Atlanta's Freedom Tech hackerspace. We have co-working desks, conference rooms, event space, maker tools, and tons of coffee. There is a very active community here in the lab. Every Wednesday night is Bitcoin night here in Atlanta. We also have meetups for cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, decentralized identity, product design, and more. We offer day passes and nomad passes for people who need to use the lab only occasionally, as well as memberships for people who plan to use the lab more regularly, such as myself. One of the best things about having a BitLab membership isn't the amenities, it's the people. Surrounding yourself with a community helps you learn faster and helps you build better. Your creativity becomes amplified when you work in this space. That's what I think, at least. If you're interested in becoming a member or supporting the space, please visit us at atlbitlab.com. That's atlbitlab.com. All right, on to our show.
Welcome to the Sovereign Computing Show. I'm Jordan Bravo, and today I have something a little different for you. This is a solo episode. Stephen will not be joining us, but we do have a great topic that we're going to get into. But first, I would like to remind everybody that you can boost into the show and let us know what you'd like to hear or what you think about the topics. You can do that by using the Fountain app on Android or iOS, which allows you to download the show and also to boost in with your boostograms, attach some sats to a message, and we'll read them here on the show. If you don't want to do that, you can also email the show at sovereign@atlbitlab.com. That's sovereign, SOVEREIGN, at atlbitlab.com. Today we're going to talk about how do we solve the problem of we want to be self-sovereign in our computing, but we want to use a mobile computing device, in other words, a smartphone, that isn't surveilled and censored and controlled and constrained. And make no mistake about it, a smartphone is a computing device, just like our desktop and laptop computers. It has an operating system and applications, and it's subject to most of the same rules, constraints, trade-offs, and benefits as a larger computing device. But there are some additional considerations. So when you go and you buy a laptop or a desktop computer, you have a lot of choices, and you've actually got the three major operating systems out there are Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. And in another episode, we'll do a deep dive on the desktop operating systems. Spoiler alert, Linux is going to be the favorite one that's going to be talked about here, and we'll go into more detail on that in that future episode. But today we're going to be talking about mobile operating systems. So what are our options if we want to use a modern smartphone mobile computing device, but we don't want to be surveilled and constrained in all of those other things? Well, let's look at the options. We have, on the one hand, the iPhone. The problem with the iPhone, as with most Apple devices, is that it's extremely locked down. The iPhone boot ROM only allows iOS to be booted. you can't put another operating system on the iPhone. You may have heard of something called jailbreaking the iPhone, but jailbreaking an iPhone only allows access to third-party app stores and other additional options that aren't normally available in iOS. However, it doesn't allow you to put a completely different operating system on it. It's still iOS. And jailbreaking an iPhone is not recommended because even though it allows you to put some additional software on there, you lose the security model. You break the security model of iOS. You're no longer getting updates from Apple, and it's not recommended to do that. You will make yourself probably definitely less secure, and arguably you're not gaining any huge privacy advantages. So sorry to break it to you folks who have iPhones as your daily driver, but if you want to take full sovereignty of your mobile computing and still have modern features and modern software, iPhones are just not an option. And I say this to you as somebody who understands. I used iPhones for a good amount of my mobile computing life. I've used iOS, I've used Android, and iOS is a great experience in many ways. But when it comes to freedom, software freedom, it's very constrained on iOS. So you don't have a lot of options. So we are going to move on to the next option. And the next option is actually something you probably don't see very often, and that would be a Linux mobile device. We're talking not Android, which uses the Linux kernel, but actual Linux that would be able to run similar apps to what you would have on a desktop or laptop computer. There are actually two phones that I want to bring up that are potential Linux phones. The first one here we're going to talk about is PinePhone by Pine64. And for those of you watching the video, I've got this up on the screen. And PinePhone's been out for a few years. It runs I think it's an Ubuntu specifically designed for mobile devices. And it seems to have decent hardware. It's not the best in the world. I have not personally used it, but from what I can tell, and based on what other people have reported, it's still a little too early, or they were a little too early, and they're missing a lot of the features that you would expect from a modern smartphone. The next option is actually something that's in progress or will be coming out in the near future, and that is the Mecha Comet. Mecha like M-E-C-H-A, and Comet is the model. And they have a Kickstarter that they are gathering funds for, and they're going to ship this. I don't remember if it's going to be shipped in 2025 or 2026, but in any case, it's not ready for public use for full, like they're not in production. I believe they've shown up at conferences, so they actually do have some hardware. It's not vaporware, at least it doesn't seem like it. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on this as a potential mobile computing device and see if I can get my hands on one. I'm going to try it out. I'll carry it around in parallel with my everyday device and see if it could replace it. So I've got some hopes for that, but in the meantime, the bottom line when it comes to Linux phones is I just don't think they're ready for mainstream use. They might be okay for hobbyists and people who are really into this kind of thing, but I'm not going to recommend it to everybody. Not until I've tried it myself, at least. So if we can't use iOS and we can't use Linux, that leaves us with the next major option, which is Android. Now, Android is actually known as the Android Open Source Project. And the Android Open Source Project, despite being developed primarily by Google, is actually a completely open source project, as the name suggests, that does not have any Google specific code in it. That's right. People might assume that because Google is the major developing source behind it, that it would be baked in. But actually, Android itself is free from Google's shenanigans and code. And so the Android open source project, what Google does is it takes that base code base, and then they add in their proprietary Google stuff, including the Google Play Store and all of the tracking and surveillance technology that's built into that. And so there have been some other projects, some other developers and organizations that have actually taken the Android open source project that started with that baseline operating system that's free of Google and anything else, proprietary, and they have built on top of it and created completely Google-free Android operating systems. The first one that we're going to talk about today is CalyxOS. Calyx is an Android version that is free of spyware and tracking and Google. And it's made by the Calyx Foundation, and they're very much focused on privacy, and they have a good reputation in the space. When you use Calyx on an Android device, it's de-Googled. And so the first thing that a lot of users want to know is, can I use the same apps? And the way that Calyx, first of all, many apps work with zero reliance on Google, but there are some that do have a reliance on the Google proprietary code that's built into Google's version of Android. And so Calyx gets around this by providing something called micro G, and it sort of simulates Google's services so that various apps that require it to run can still run. I'm not going to speak too much more about Calyx. I just want to put it out there that it's a good option, and I think it's healthy that the privacy ecosystem has more than one project that's working on Google-free Android. But the next project we're going to talk about is what I think is the best way to go about having a free and de-Googled Android operating system, and that's GrapheneOS. Now, GrapheneOS is an open source Android operating system project, and they are highly focused on privacy and security. They're a nonprofit, and in fact, they're so focused on security, they have such a good reputation for improving the security of Android that many of their updates and improvements to the operating system have been upstreamed, and they are used by Google as well. So if you can use that as kind of an indication that they know what they're doing when it comes to security. GrapheneOS is only supported on the Google Pixel. Now that might sound a little surprising because you have a Google piece of hardware, and yet it's the only phone that they support for de-Googling and running a Google-free Android operating system. And there's some very specific reasons for why they only support the Google Pixel. And that is the Google Pixel's security hardware is unmatched in the rest of the Android phone space. They really do rival the iPhone in terms of the security and quality of the hardware. And there's an additional consideration, which is that the Google Pixel is the only phone that will allow the user to both unlock the bootloader, put on another operating system, and then relock the bootloader. And what that means is if you have a locked bootloader and somebody has physical access to your phone, they can't load another operating system on there or do anything malicious. They can't tamper with the operating system or load any kind of malware on there. Whereas
all the other phones that you would buy that are Android compatible. For example, Samsung, Motorola, etc. You can unlock the bootloader on some of them and load another operating system onto there, but then you can't relock the bootloader. So your phone would then be susceptible to what's referred to as an evil maid attack, where if your phone is left out and somebody has physical access to it, they can then load malware on there. And you would have no idea that they had done so if they're a sophisticated attacker. So in short, the Pixel by Google, even though it ironically comes from Google, which is a company that we are trying to get away from and is not present with any of their software on GrapheneOS, they make the best hardware that's vendor neutral and therefore is perfect for these de-Googled operating systems. So where can you get a good Pixel? Most people know that you have your cellular phone provider and you might be renting your phone from them, where you're paying a monthly fee for your subscription, for your phone subscription, and part of that price baked in is the cost of your phone. But this is actually a terrible way to buy your phone. First of all, you're going to be having a carrier locked phone, and which means you don't have the freedom to change your provider if you wanted to. So when you are going to buy a phone, buy it from places other than your carrier and make sure that it is factory unlocked. The other thing you want to do is buy it in a much more private manner if possible. So if you can buy it in person, maybe it's at a place like Best Buy with cash, that's great. Or maybe you want to go a method and buy a used one because you're going to be wiping the operating system from it anyway. It's not a big deal. You're going to be loading a new operating system onto it. So before we go into where you could buy a phone to load GrapheneOS onto, I want to point out that there are some companies now that are catering to people who want GrapheneOS or these other privacy-focused OSs on Android phones. I'm going to go over some of them right now, but I am not endorsing or recommending these. You'll see it why in a second, but I think the best way to go about it is to just buy one that has regular Google Android on it and then put GrapheneOS on it, do it yourself. And it's actually really easy. You don't need to download any extra software. If you have a web browser, which every computer does, it's a very easy click install process. And yeah, I think it's anybody listening to this is capable of doing that. There's no command line required, no magical software developer incantations. This is all very graphical and you just follow a simple set of instructions. So there's a site called liberateyourtech.com, and they sell GrapheneOS preloaded onto Pixels. But you're going to see here the other reason why I don't recommend that you go with one of these sites is that they charge a huge premium. So a Pixel, let's take a look at some of these prices. A Pixel 8 with 128 gigabytes of storage, they're selling it for $899, $900. And that's a huge premium. Let's look at another site, privatephoneShop.com. And they are selling a Pixel 8 Pro with CalyxOS or LineageOS. That's another one we haven't talked about, but it's another de-Googled Android. This is $750. And finally, there's another company called Above Phone. And here they are advertising a Pixel 9 for $1,100. And that comes with Google, that comes with Graphene, I believe. Let me take a look at what they are advertising here. But in any case, I think anybody listening is perfectly capable of buying a phone with Google Android on it, the typical out-of-the-box one, and then adding GrapheneOS to it. If you look here on the site swappa.com, This is a site that sells, for those of you who don't know, they sell used and refurbished devices. And if you look here under unlocked Google phones, the comparable Pixel 9 unlocked, which we just saw over here on abovephone.com for $1,100, you can buy a used Pixel 9 for $398. So that's a great deal. I don't think that's spending too much just to have, to have a top of the line phone that's completely unlocked and you can load whatever you want onto it and it's going to be completely private and self-sovereign. You could even drop back a couple of generations. The Pixel 9 is the current generation. The Pixel 10 will be released later this year in probably August of 2025. But even if you were to go with the Pixel 8, let's say, here's a Google Pixel 8 for $293 on Swappa, and that's awesome. That's a great deal. You could even go back another generation. The A models are the less expensive of any given generation. So, for example, the 7A will be less expensive than the 7. Here's a Google Pixel 7A unlocked, $164. That's amazing. I might just want to pick up one of those just to have an extra, maybe for traveling or for nicing around, giving it to friends or family. But like I said, make sure it's unlocked and you can put whatever operating system on it you want. Now, when you do buy that and you are ready to put GrapheneOS onto it, their website has a install wizard and it's going to walk you through. It's web-based, so again, you're doing it in the browser and you'll go through the instructions. You don't have to type any commands. It's just going to be clicking this button here, unlock the bootloader. So you're going to plug it in your computer. You're going to click unlock bootloader, download, flash, and then lock again. Remember that locking it afterwards is very important. The Pixel 8 and later have 7 years of support from GrapheneOS. So you don't have to worry about your phone getting out of date. That's really good. I think that's on par with Google, possibly even better for some of those older generations. Now, once you have GrapheneOS installed, you're going to need to get apps, all the apps you use in your daily workflow. And I highly recommend listening to our previous episode on alternative app stores. You can use Google Play just the same way that you do on Google's Android, but you are going to be giving up some privacy because you have to sign into your Google account, which means all of the apps that you download and install are going to be correlated with your account. Even if you use Google Play, however, you are getting a lot of privacy on GrapheneOS because they run Google Play services in a sandbox, application sandbox. And what that means is normally on Google's Android, Google Play services has highly elevated privileges. And that's just cybersecurity speak for it has God mode basically, and it can and does monitor everything that goes on the phone. So you as the user do not have the ability to disable it. So Google Play's services, it can see every app that's installed. It monitors the usage of every app. It monitors and tracks your location and other telemetry that it reports back to Google. So just by using GrapheneOS and even with Google Play services in its sandboxed environment, meaning it's not allowed to escape and have elevated privileges like super user privileges, that alone is giving you a good level of protection. But the less you can use Google, the better. So if you reduce your reliance on Google by replacing your various Google apps with alternatives, then you're just going to be incrementally improving your privacy. And this is a great approach because you don't have to go all or nothing, right? So if you were to just replace your Google Android with GrapheneOS and then install all the apps that you're still using and continue using it in that way, you are gaining some privacy there. But then what you can do is over time, as you slowly replace and find alternatives for your Google apps, you will then be incrementally improving your sovereignty as you go forward and making continual progress and not having to worry about jumping completely from one set of apps to a complete replacement stack. So I really advocate for that incremental approach because it's a lot more realistic to do for everybody. When I completely de-Googled my tech stack, it took me over a year because, like most people, I'm busy and I've got my apps that I'm using on a regular basis and I'm used to them and I'm logged in. So don't be too hard on yourself. Give yourself small, attainable goals in terms of taking back more self-sovereignty in your computing life, and they are absolutely achievable. By using Google Play Services Sandboxed, you are able to use 99% of apps out there that would work on Google Android. So I've successfully am able to use things on GrapheneOS such as banking apps, and those are typically the most annoying to use without Google, but they work for the most part. I would say there are occasionally apps that are going to give you some trouble. I've not had a problem with Cash App, but I've heard reports from somebody I know that was using Android or GrapheneOS, and they couldn't get Cash App working properly. For some reason, the app was having trouble with the OS. Another thing that I know is that even though Android Auto works, Google Pay, in other words, if you use your phone as tap to pay, that's probably not going to work unless you have a specific banking app that allows that without Google. But that's just something to be aware of. But other than that, everything would work just as you expect. The last thing I'll say before we wrap up on this topic today is that if you are currently using maybe a Samsung with Google Android on it, or maybe you're using an iPhone with iOS on it, consider taking the approach of buying a used Pixel, and loading GrapheneOS onto it, and then keeping your main phone and then as your daily communication device, as you already do, and then using your GrapheneOS phone on the side when you have time, putting some apps on there, see if you can mirror some of your workflow and try to incorporate it into your day-to-day activities. And I think you'll see that it is very usable. It's come a long way since in the last few years. I know originally there were a lot of limitations and it was very inconvenient to use, but these days I think it's perfectly doable for 90% of the population out there that is using a smartphone and relies on it for their day-to-day work. It's time for listener feedback. And a reminder that if you want to message us, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to fountain.fm, search for the ATL BitLab podcast, and you can boost into the show. You can send a message and attach sats to it, and we will read that on the show and respond to your feedback and take your advice in terms of what you want to hear. We also have an email address that you can write into, and that email is sovereign@atlbitlab.com. That's SOVEREIGN @atlbitlab.com. And we have a listener who wrote in. Miles asks about self-hosted backups, and he wants to know if you are hosting your own files on your own server For example, if you have a home server running Nextcloud and you're storing your pictures, your videos, and your documents on your home server, what happens if your house burns down or floods, or the server gets destroyed for some reason, or there's some other disaster? And that is a great question. I'm going to give a quick answer here, and I will tease the next topic that we're going to be talking about. And the answer to that is you want to have backups, of course. You need to have a backup at another location, so an off-site backup. And we're going to talk about how to do that in an encrypted way so that wherever you are storing it, that data is secure and private, and that the people who are storing that, whether it's a third party or someone you know, that is completely encrypted in such a way that only you are able to decrypt it. And if you ever had a problem with your server or your drive was destroyed for whatever reason, you can then, once you get up and running with the new server, you would be able to pull that data in from your offsite backup, decrypt it, and restore everything and sleep easy at night. So we'll talk about that more in a future show. Please let us know what you think of that topic. If you have questions on it, if you have comments, have you self-hosted anything yet? Have you had backups? Have you had trouble with backups? Boost in and let us know, or you can send an email as well. And we are working on getting a chat going. It's probably going to be a matrix chat, so keep your ears peeled for that. We'll talk about it more as we have more information to share with you. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about anything that we discussed, you can look for links in the show notes. That should be in your podcast player, or you can go to atlbitlab.com/podcast. On a final note, if you found this information useful and you want to help support us, you can always send us a tip in Bitcoin. Your support really helps it so that we can keep bringing you content like this. All right, catch you later.